Hi, and welcome to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act presentation. When you look at this act at a glance, it's a federal law that provides protections for students with learning and other disabilities. It started in 1975 as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, and that required public schools to provide appropriate educational services for all children with disabilities between the ages of 3 to 21. In 2004, they amended that original law or act, and then they said now we're going to mandate public schools to provide specialized services to children with disabilities from ages 3 to 21 for equal access to education. So, what are the main objectives? Well, we must ensure that all children with disabilities are approved for equality of educational opportunity. It has to be full participation and a guide to independent living. And there has to be some way that this education is going to help them to be self sufficient economically. So there are some principles behind ID, okay, and there's six in number. So the first one is the what's called FAP, and this is the free appropriate public education. And they have something called zero reject policy, where there's a rule against excluding any student. Okay, so it prohibits schools from excluding any students with a disability from free appropriate public education. And that applies to the state and all of the school districts and private schools. And then they have something else called the meaningful educational benefit. And this is a requirement that focuses on raised expectations and appropriate progress and transition into post secondary education and independent living. The evaluation must be appropriate, meaning that schools are required to conduct evaluations on students that they feel may have a disability. It has to be implemented by a team, and it must be administered in a non discriminatory basis. Then we have something called the IEP, otherwise known as the Individualized Education Plan. It's a legal written document and it's developed by a team, and it draws upon existing evaluation information in order to meet the student's unique educational needs. Also, it includes that you have to be in a least restrictive environment, or LRE. Now, this is guaranteed placement in general education setting for the students. Okay, and the parents are involved. There is parental participation. They are part of the decision making progress and groups. They are entitled to be notified of any changes or additions to the plan, and they have a right to refuse what the team has suggested. And then there also have some safeguards, and these are used to advocate for the parent and the child. If there are, they protect the parent from parental access to information pertaining to placement and transition planning, and you can resolve any disagreements that you don't agree with. Now, when we look at the qualifying categories, we see that there are many here. And I'll just name a few. You have speech and hearing impairment, blindness and visual impairment, deafness and hearing, and the list goes on. So, what are some of the strengths of the IDEA Act? Well, number one, the free education. The public is required to pay for the education, and it doesn't matter the disability. Number two, its evaluation makes sense. It's specific to each child and their disability. Next, it levels the educational playing field for those with disabilities. Okay, and the child is placed in an environment that meets his or her needs, and it has great safeguarding and protections for parents. On the other hand, evaluations are only as good as the people that are trained to administer them. Because the IEPs are audited and monitored on a quarterly basis, this puts a lot of pressure on the educators to meet the goals, at least on paper. Okay, and we hope they're doing it in the classroom as well. And when we look at autism students, they don't quite fit into the least restrictive environment because some of them are very gifted and only have like a behavioral issue, and it's very hard to, handle that in the classroom and find the correct setting for them. And then the other thing is parents are not equally involved in the process. Some parents are out of the loop. They don't know what's going on, and that can be problematic. So how does this affect uh, teaching and learning? Well, an inclusive classroom can be very overwhelming. Okay, the classroom teacher has added responsibilities. They may be a part of the IEP. They have to be a part of the IEP meetings. They have to collect the information for the student, and they have to implement any accommodations or modifications that are recommended. Special education teachers are now required to be more qualified based on this new inclusive classroom model. And as I stated earlier, some autistic students are not benefiting from IDEA, and their parents are having a lot of trouble finding accommodations for them. In some cases, they may have to travel an hour and a half away from their familiarity to have access to education. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it.